Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're joining us. We're just going to let people have a few minutes to connect or a few seconds to connect, and then we'll be starting in just a bit. I'm Paige Parker with Oregon Community Foundation, and we're so grateful you're here today for this special virtual briefing on hunger in Oregon. Today, you will learn the scale of the challenge Oregon faces, how communities are pitching in to meet the moment, and how donors can support their neighbors and Oregon's food supply now and help build long-term stability. Our guests today are Lori Garrard, Executive Director of Klamath Lake County's Food Bank, Scott Cooper, Executive Director of Neighbor Impact, which serves Central Oregon counties and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Rick Galpo, President and CEO of Marion Polk Food Chair, Andrea Williams, President of Oregon Food Bank, Aaron Borla, Executive Director of the Roundhouse Foundation, and Malian Pop, Director of Donor Relations for Oregon Community Foundation. Our moderator today is Lisa Mensah, President and CEO of Oregon Community Foundation. Lisa serves on the board of Feeding America, a nationwide network of 200 food banks and 60,000 food pantries and programs. Lisa?
Thank you, Paige, and thank you, everyone. Welcome to our briefing today. We are thrilled to be joined by so many of you, and I see folks logging in still, so welcome to this briefing. I want to acknowledge several folks from the governor's office. I want to acknowledge Kristen Moynihan, who serves as our representative for the Oregon Disaster Funders Network, and several foundation colleagues. So this is a great way to spend an hour together to learn about an important issue. The purpose of today's webinar is to give our donors and our community some context to understand the crisis of hunger in Oregon. And this discussion was prompted by the disruption in the SNAP benefits. But our focus is really to look broader on the long-term solutions and how we're going to move forward as a state. We're so grateful to the many donors who've already stepped up to support our neighbors in this time of food insecurity. So what are we grappling with? We're grappling with the fact that 1 in 8 Oregonians experience hunger, and that's a huge number. We're also grappling with the fact that there is help. Our food bank system is, in fact, quite strong, and it has distributed over 110 million pounds of food in the last year. That's a stat from the Oregon Food Bank that you'll be hearing from later. But the supply of food coming into the system has dropped, and you're going to hear more about this from the people who speak today about why that is. And finally, at the same time that we've seen this drop in food, more Oregonians are relying on food banks. Even last year, our food bank system saw an increase. We saw 2.5 million visits to food banks last year. This was about a 31% increase from the previous years. And the disruption in food benefits caused so many Oregonians to visit food banks for the first time this year. And we expect many more visits to come. So this is a system that is under stressed. So we wanted to start this conversation by inviting people who are really on the front lines of serving our neighbors in this food crisis. And we're going to start outside of the Portland metro area, and we're going to start by inviting 3 leaders of regional food banks in Oregon to share really what they're seeing. So I'll ask you to turn on your cameras. We're going to speak with Lori Garrard. She's the Executive Director of the Klamath Lake County's Food Bank. She's in Klamath Falls. Hi, Lori. We're going to also move to Scott Cooper, based in Bent, who's the executive director of Neighbor Impact, which serves Central Oregon counties and the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs. And finally, we've asked Rick Gapo. Rick is the president and CEO of the Marion Polk Food Share. So thank you, Lori and Scott and Rick, for really taking us right into your worlds and giving us a little time this morning. And Lori, I'm going to start with you. The big question, and you saw my framing slides, is who are you serving now? What is the reason somebody shows up at the Klamath Lake County's food bank?
Well, they show up because they're hungry. But we are seeing so many new faces in our organization. We have an air base here in Klamath Falls, and all of those federal employees are not receiving a paycheck. So those 1,200 employees at the Kingsley Field Air Base are visiting us, and also all of our SNAP recipients who had that pause, and they were panicked and they were scared. And so we were seeing them, and they needed us. So many new faces, so many new families are just coming to see us.
Yeah. And if you think about, I don't know how long you've served, but if you think about what are the changes that you're seeing now? Obviously, you've talked about people who were just furloughed or, caught in the government shutdown. But what changes are you seeing in the people who are now seeking help?
So I'm fairly new to food banking. I've only been doing it for about 18 months, but I'm extremely passionate about it. And for us, it is just so many families who really were reliant on SNAP they were thinking, we don't need to see the food bank. We are going to save that food for people who they felt truly needed it. So we're seeing a lot of families, so many families, people on fixed incomes, seniors. I have not seen this many seniors come through our doors until just the last couple weeks.
Right. Do you have any numbers for us on who's coming through? Or I know you're just trying to do this right now. Yeah.
The numbers are fluctuating every day. I would say we've seen double the amount of people that we have in the past. One of my biggest pantries usually serves like 70 households every time they're open, and last week it was 184 in one morning.
Wow. And this is
So
a pantry. This is a pantry that's related to you. Tell us a little bit about how that works.
So all of the food comes to my food bank, and then we distribute it to our 13 pantries in Klamath and Lake counties. And my biggest pantry is right across the street from me. It's our Salvation Army. They're open 3 days a week. Thank goodness for them. And that's probably the most traffic we see. So I get to watch them out my front window every Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, and Fridays.
Tuesday, Thursday.
Yes.
What's the need? What is the need you have now?
Right now, just food. I watch them. I've been sending people over because we are having some trouble with parking. So we are so full. People are parking way down the streets. They are they show up like 2 hours before pantry time. They come getting out of their vehicles with their wagons because they know they have to kind of hike with food after they've received it. And it's people, they have their kids on their hips and they're pulling their wagons, and they need to be fed, and they don't know who else to turn to.
Yeah. I'm really glad you're there. What gives you a little hope in all of this?
My community gives me hope.
Yeah.
The last couple of weeks, my community is so generous, and it is neighbors taking care of neighbors, and they have really stepped up to make sure that we can continue to feed all of these families.
Yeah. I'm so glad you're there.
Thank
All
you.
right. Southern Oregon. I'm going to turn now to Central Oregon, and I'm going to go to you, Scott. And kind of the same question for you. Situate us in Central Oregon. Tell us about the people that you're serving.
So we actually have been seeing our numbers build for quite a while, since 2019. We were serving about 330,000 individuals a year in 2019. That's a duplicated account because most people get served more than once during the year.
But still.
But we're over 950,000. So we've tripled, and the types of people we're seeing, the new people that are fueling that are mostly working class families that simply can't afford to make ends meet. The housing crisis is the #1 contributor to that. When people get done paying for their housing, their childcare, and their energy, and whatever else they have, there's just simply no money left. And the easiest thing to do is to go to a food bank and try and supplement that budget. So we have served quite a bit of that. Of course, it went on steroids as soon as we got to the SNAP cutoff. That just added to the burden. So we are seeing reports of people lining up at 4:30 in the morning to try and be first in line. We're hearing of increases of 50 to 100%. One of the problems that we didn't identify till a bit later in this crisis, later meaning a couple days in, was the fact that so many people had panicked on the announcement that the SNAP benefits wouldn't be paid, that before even the first set of benefits weren't paid on the first of the month, we had people come in and clean out the stocks of the existing stocks of the food pantries because they were trying to get ahead of it. Very logical behavior.
Wow.
So, I agree with the statement that supply and where is the food is the #1 issue.
Yeah. Scott, what does it mean to clean out the supply?
I mean, they took everything that was in the pantry. The way our model works, not dissimilar from Clackamas, is we're the wholesaler. We're collecting food from the grocery stores. We're bringing in food from OFB. We're buying food. And then we redistribute that through 57 partner organizations plus 18 mobile distributions that we do ourselves. So those 57 partners are critical. We can't do it without their hands. And they are reporting back to us, hey, we need a quick infusion of food because we don't have any because they came and took it all.
Wow. What's the way you restock? Is it community organizations? Is it Oregon Food Bank? How do you restock?
It's all those and buying food. So
Yeah.
this time around, we obviously reached out immediately to Oregon Food Bank. Oregon Food Bank was able to increase some of its support to us. Our community was amazingly generous. As soon as we put the word out, we were in trouble. Money started pouring in, and we've been buying food. But of course, it takes a few days for food to get here. That's one of the big bottlenecks. And then donations. We are just overwhelmed with donations at the moment. Donations are great. But donations come with the fact that you have to touch everything that's donated, sort it, put it in a bin, and you're already doing double time just trying to keep up with your increased demand. And then just buying. We're buying as much as we can. The state money that was promised has yet to hit us.
Okay. This is one of the reasons we're having this call. It's so donors can hear directly from you who are right on the front lines of this and know how to give, know where. So it helps us to have a description of what it means to buy food, or that the cash that you actually need is to get this supply up. What else do you need?
One of the things that we've needed, and we've certainly put the word out about that, is volunteer support. When we're serving this many more people, we need a few more hands out there. Community has been great about responding to that. And then I think at a bigger picture level, what we really need is a complete rethink of the policy framework in this state for who is responsible for making sure people don't go hungry. Back in the 2009-10 era, Oregon got itself the title of hungriest state in the nation. And there was a massive outpouring of effort to try and fix that. We were embarrassed by that. We didn't want it to happen again. We created some systems. They were wonderful. And we've let our guard down. And I think this emergency is a flashing red light to us that we need to rebuild some systems.
Good. And Scott, same question that I asked Lori too. Where do you take any hope?
There is hope in all of this. First of all, the response from the community far exceeded anything that I ever expected. I very much agree with Lori on that one. I'm just so in gratitude. And those conversations that I mentioned need to happen have begun.
Yeah.
There's a long way to go to conclude them, but they have
Good.
begun.
Good. Rick, I'm going to turn to you, and you're in the Marion Polk Food Share. So, Rick, tell me about the people you are seeing in Marion Polk. Yeah.
Sure, and you got to begin this story almost pre-pandemic. So pre-pandemic, we had about 10,000 visits to our 70 pantries that we have in Marion and Polk counties. During the height of the pandemic, about 14,000, and then currently about 18,000, and that's not counting what's happening at the shutdown. So about 18,000 unique visits per month.
Wow.
That's really important to know that we're just hunger is getting worse. People are getting needing that food assistance more. And I want to tell you a story that personal story of just somebody I met a few days ago, and it was at the local store I was at. Um, I was asking because I was curious to know what this was on the 5th. I was asking about if there was less foot traffic in the stores because there was no SNAP benefits. And she said, yes, it was slow. And then she kind of opened up about herself and she says, yeah, me and my family, we're going to go shopping and we have $60 to spend. And she kind of made it a variable for me to ask her if she was on SNAP. And she said, yes, I'm on SNAP. And it's her and her 2 kids. She works at the local grocery store. She works gets $20 an hour. This is all within about a 5-minute conversation. Gets $20 an hour. She works 20 hours a week, and she says, "I've asked for more hours, but I couldn't get them." And so this is somebody who wanted to work more,
Right.
couldn't get them, is on SNAP, and had the SNAP benefit, and literally at a grocery store, and saying, "I don't know how I can afford the food," and this is what we're talking about. When we talk about who's on SNAP, we're talking the most common example is a parent with child. That is the most common family configuration on SNAP. In our area, it's about 25,000 children were served on SNAP. And
Just in Marion Polk?
yes, just in Marion and Polk.
Wow.
So when I think about what food banks do, we were in this is the first time food banks have been asked to serve the community and address food insecurity without SNAP in the background.
Yeah.
And we saw more people come because of that.
Yeah.
About for every meal food bank serves, SNAP serves about 9 meals. That's kind of the rough math on this. And so food banks are always meant to be the safety net to that government safety net program. We want our government to have safety net, and I'm talking SNAP, Medicaid, but Medicare, Social Security, those things that kind of make our society feel protected. When that safety net starts getting bigger holes, food banks step in.
You're seeing, yeah.
And when SNAP was disrupted, those holes were huge for about 42 million people nationwide, about 90,000 people in Salem, in Marion and Polk counties.
Yeah. Same question for you, Rick, sorry.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing any hope?
Well, let me just say, first of all, there's hope in the food bank system. We were here before the pandemic, during the pandemic, after the pandemic. We're here. I was with Commissioner Daniel Bethel from our local area, and she said, "Do you need people? Do you need volunteers? Do you need locations?" I was like, "No, we have all that."
Yeah.
We're literally in Oregon. We're literally in 1,200 different locations where people are getting food. It's one of the great strengths of food banking is the systems are already structured. So what is really interesting to me right now is I think food banks have not paid enough attention to proclaiming the goodness of SNAP and the vitalness of SNAP. And I think where it's like, oh, we got to make sure we're talking about both stories, our work and SNAP. And I'm really excited about how many other community members were like, I don't understand SNAP. How many people? Oh, we should be talking about that. And I saw this great quote that said, why are we asking? People are asking why are there 42 million people on SNAP when we should be asking why are working parents on SNAP? Why do we have that system? And so I think even that question being asked was amazing. And so what gives me hope is more people are talking about it. They've asked us how to support us. Our answers are simple: money, food, advocacy.
Love it. I love things that sum up in 3 words.
Yep.
So thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate that. And your descriptions, all 3 of you, on how it works in your home bases. And Rick, I appreciate your point that the systems are already there. That's always good when there's a system that's already there, and it helps us as donors to lock in. All right, we're going to go from 3 places around Oregon, And we're going to bring Andrea Williams, who's the president and CEO of the Oregon Food Bank. And I'm going to ask Andrea to turn on her camera, and I'm going to bring everybody back in a bit. But Andrea, could I invite you to come on?
Hi,
And
Lisa. Thank you for having me.
this is a very busy time for you, and I'm so thankful to have you here on this webinar. And we've got well over, I'm seeing the count at 117. So we thought maybe we'd get 100. This wonderful. So you saw give us some more context for how does the food bank network work?
Yeah, well, Lisa, thank you to you and your team and your donors for being here. Certainly, this is one of the issues of the hour for us at Oregon Food Bank and regional food banks here. This is our everyday. And so just a quick synopsis of Oregon Food Bank, how we work. So Oregon Food Bank is the hub of a statewide food assistance network that Rick and Scott and Lori are all a part of. And we have united over the last 40 plus years to end hunger and its root causes in Oregon and also Clark County, Washington. The network is comprised of 21 regional food banks, which are connected to 1,200 food assistance sites.
Wow.
So we're talking pantries, shelters, meal sites, right? And that is precisely how we get a full statewide coverage from every single county. Oregon Food Bank directly operates 5 of these through branches. So Tillamook, Beaverton, Portland, the Dalles, Ontario are run by Oregon Food Bank directly. But then we partner with 16 independent nonprofits. Some of those are exclusively food banks, like Klamath Lake Food Bank, run by Lori, and Marion Polk Food Share, run by Rick. And others are programs operating from within a community action program, like Neighbor Impact that Scott just spoke to. So Oregon Food Bank coordinates this network. We serve as the connector to Feeding America, which you sit on their board. Thank you very much for your board service. And we receive national support through Feeding America, right? That's over 200 food banks nationwide. So we're not alone in doing this work. It's an amazing community. And then Oregon Food Bank sources food and funds on behalf of the entire system through our statewide headquarters in Portland, which is where I'm sitting. And now you heard my colleagues here, regional food banks also independently resource themselves through local food and funds donations from within their region. But food is also sourced through the Oregon Food Bank. It gets collected here in Portland and then redistributed to communities statewide. So a little bit about how we work. We have various sources of food, some from the USDA, but a lot of it's from donated manufacturers, farmers, agriculture. And then there is quite a bit that we also do purchase, as Scott also mentioned.
And Scott was mentioning, yeah. Tell us, break it down. These are the donors who are on this call because they want to hear when someone donates to this network, where does that support go?
Yeah, so I mean, part of it goes to the operations of our organizations, right? It takes staff and trucks and warehouses, and forklifts to physically move the food. And then part of it goes to the actual food itself. It's really a mix of those things. A majority of it, though, is in the staffing that it takes to move the food. A lot of the resources that we receive through the federal government and through the state primarily funds food. And so I'm sure you will hear from my partners with the regional food banks, oftentimes we're struggling to pay for our basic operations. And it is quite costly, right? When you think about the energy it takes to cool a refrigerator or a freezer. And so all of those things, all of those private donations help make sure that we're able to run as an entity, as an organization.
Can you also go a little further in describing some of the things that came up when we talked to the local banks is the gaps in supply, running out of food, where are the gaps that you see? And I thought that Rick's stat about what had changed since the pandemic, my God, I didn't think we'd ever see a need greater than the pandemic. And now we're kind of in one that we've actually exceeded those pandemic levels, but where are you seeing gaps?
It's a very good point, Lisa. So when Oregon Food Bank looks at our statewide number of visits to our food sites, the pandemic was a peak at 1.8 million visits. Now think about the number you started with, 2.5 million visits as of last year. And our most recent data, which we haven't quite released yet, is almost at 3 million visits.
Wow.
And so you're seeing a skyrocketing after the pandemic. And so naturally, if food source is not keeping up with that, the gap is gonna continue to grow. So we're experiencing both. We're seeing an increase in visits by 31%. And our most recent data shows a 51% increase over the last 2 years. Meanwhile, food resources are going down. And so when we're looking at gaps, there are a couple of contributors to that. So earlier this year, the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, permanently discontinued a stream of food and funding. You might have seen it in the news. We called it the Community Credit Corporation through the Emergency Food Assistance Program, TFAP-CCC is its acronym. We saw 90 annual truckloads canceled coming to our statewide warehouse. That's the equivalent of about 4.2 million pounds of food. And when you look at how much that costs, how much that value is, it's $6.5 million worth of food that was coming to our state that just got canceled on the drop of a dime.
That's just an Oregon stat.
Just in Oregon. This happened across the nation to every single state, but for Oregon, it was the equivalent of $6.5 million in food, just canceled immediately. And so, we were already seeing an increase in visits. Suddenly we see a dip in food we normally expect to get from the USDA. On top of that, the USDA also terminated something called the Local Food Purchasing Agreement. That was another $4 million in lost funding that Oregon Food Bank was using to support local farmers in growing and distributing foods to their own communities who are experiencing hunger. So it's like layers of an onion. You just keep peeling it back and keep peeling it back. And all of this was happening before the current SNAP crisis that we find ourselves in, right? And so I think Rick's point was very important in that, we were already struggling to keep up with demand as it was. And then here comes along the impacts of the government shutdown, which created delays in SNAP benefits in November, leaving 757,000 Oregonians without grocery dollars for over a week, and which drove an influx of people into our network to get food on their tables.
Yeah. Wow. This is a definition of challenging time. All right. I don't know when you sleep, but what is giving you some hope?
Well, as my colleagues have said, I am so proud of the way that our communities have stepped up, including our state. So I would be remiss to not mention, and many of you have probably seen it in the news, right? Governor Kotek, in coordination with our network, swiftly declared a food insecurity emergency in Oregon and allocated $5 million to food banks across our state through the Oregon Food Bank for food purchase. And has also helped mobilize support from local government and private sources. Keep in mind, that's really good news, but keep in mind though, just to put it in perspective, that 1 month of SNAP in Oregon is equivalent to $142 million in benefits, right? So, or $30 million a week. So 5 million is helpful,
right?
And it won't get us anywhere near meeting the gap. And so, it's hard to keep track of what's happening every day in the news. What we're seeing right now is a back and forth between federal court orders and appeals. The state of Oregon and Washington and a few other states issued full benefits to recipients late last week, which was a huge relief for so many Oregonians that suddenly saw their EBT cards refilled with dollars to go to the grocery store. And then now the federal government is trying to threaten retaliation. So we'll see how all of that plays out in court. But where it all lands is just so much uncertainty, fear to use SNAP because they're not sure if it's going to be clawed back. And it's still having the effect of people preparing, right? Preparing by going to a food bank, preparing by, utilizing their dollars if they can. But it is such an uncertain and just unpredictable time for so many people. And so what's giving me hope is that the state is doing everything we can from the state level, from our Oregon Department of Human Services, all the way to Oregon Food Bank Network, and even to the more informal mutual aid networks, family and friend networks, restaurants that are stepping up and providing free meals. It has been beautiful to see the way that everyone is stepping up, and it's hard to sustain. And so looking long term, we're left to ask ourselves, how are we going to fix this in the long term? Because we can do something now, we can do something next week, in a month, but it is expensive to purchase food for 750,000 Oregonians plus all those that are not.
That's the challenge. Yeah.
So I know you asked me about hope, but I quickly
No, it's okay. You got it. But there is some hope in here. We are meeting a current and urgent need. If you could describe the need that you see right now to private donors, what is it that you would say focus on?
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I wish I could say that once the government reopens, SNAP will be fine. But unfortunately, that's not the case. It's important to remember that what we are experiencing now with SNAP is a foreshadowing of what's to come due to the passage of H.R. 1, which was a budget bill passed by Congress earlier this year, which will lead to the experience of about a 21% in cuts for SNAP benefits in Oregon. So imagine, right? We already are seeing an increase in need. We're going to continue to see increase in visits to pantries because SNAP recipients will see less benefits by the order of 21%.
Putting more stress on your system.
Putting more stress. And so when I think of, what our needs are, it's not just this week, it's not just next month, it's for the next several years.
Yeah.
And so I would hope people would keep that in mind, that, while the headlines will fade, the needs will continue to skyrocket. And I hope that people won't forget that we're going to be stuck with this problem for years to come until we get broader government intervention.
Okay. Well, you are speaking to a good group. I am going to bring you back in a bit, and I want to bring in one of our key foundation partners, and that is Erin Borla of the Roundhouse Foundation. So I want to thank Andrea and bring in Erin. Erin leads the Roundhouse Foundation, and we've got several foundations on this call. I was happy to see Toya Fick of Meyer on the call, and Craig Kelly of the Kelly Foundation, Family Foundation. So, but Erin, you leapt in, and before this whole SNAP crisis, and you had a big focus on how to strengthen, particularly our rural foundation, food banks. So tell us a little bit about why you were inspired to lean into the food bank network in rural areas.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me. I think Andrea mentioned the passing of H.R. 1 in June of this past year, and recognizing that there are going to be challenges. We already see an increase in the usage of food pantries in rural and remote places and tribal places across the country in comparison to more metro places, where the increased need, I think the statistic is 21% use the rural food pantries, food banking system in rural and remote places versus 12% in urban and metro places. And Andrea, you can tell me if I got that quote wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the numbers that we've been using. So with the passing of H.R. 1, our team determined there is a real need, and this is a long-term need. So at our June meeting, we approved a $6 million investment over 3 years, $2 million a year, to encourage additional food pantry and food bank support. What you've heard today from our partners at Neighbor Impact and at Marion Pool Food Share and Klamath Lake is that they also have these pantries that they serve. So through our 2 million, we've invested in 18 of the regional food banks of the 21 that Oregon Food Bank serves, those that are most rural and remote serving, and provided a 3-year grant to each of those food banks at $60,000 a
wow.
year. Plus, we've provided grant making to rural pantries, rural senior centers, Meals on Wheels sites, tribal food pantries and commodities sites, as well as summer backpack programs and other student-led programs. So you've heard about all of the different ways folks are accessing food from different resources, but we wanted to identify some of those and really call those out for additional support. In addition, we've provided some technical assistance grants, providing opportunities for training, strategic planning, if they need a piece of equipment. We've provided some vehicle grants because we hear that a lot, that there is a need to be able to pick up the food and then distribute it.
Right.
So at this point, we've provided grants to 71 local pantries, to
Wow.
30 senior serving organizations, and then 10 technical assistance vehicle grants throughout this year. Those programs are still open through the end of November, and we've been on the phone with our regional partners as well as our local food pantries to hear what those needs are on the ground, and happy to collect and share with folks that have questions or concerns about what's happening, all that research that we've been working on.
Yeah. I can imagine that many of the you're getting down not only to the regionals, but to the pantry level. And I can imagine a lot of those are not lots of full-time staff, that we've still got volunteers doing this.
Correct.
So the ability for a volunteer to buy a truck is modest. So I'm glad. Who's followed you, Erin, amongst foundation colleagues? Who's joined in with you?
Well, we're thrilled to have Oregon Community Foundation team members work with us on this project.
Great.
Meyer Memorial Trust has also
Meyer.
joined in. Kelly Family Foundation, we've seen some interest. Marie Lamfrom Charitable Foundation has also come alongside and provided grants to the regional food banks across the state. So we're seeing a lot of interest. There are certain programs that our organization can't fund, and so we're still collecting those applications and sharing those with other partners. We do have a few other foundations that are interested. They're still building their program within their own internal systems, but
Right.
always happy to share applications and resources to folks that are interested.
Great. And thank you for your leadership as part of the Oregon Disaster Funders Network too, Erin. Roundhouse has been so key to that. And we consider this a disaster. So
Correct.
so we are all working now to get funds where they're most needed. So I want to say Roundhouse is not a very old foundation. How many years have you clocked now?
We've been around for just over 20 years, but
20.
we just within the last 5 years have seen our statewide growth.
This is awesome. So let me ask you, what gives you hope?
Well, quickly before we talk about that, I just want to note that SNAP benefits also provide opportunity for folks to purchase things that maybe aren't always provided at the food pantry.
Yes.
So those local cash contributions are so critical. So folks can access things like hygiene items or baby formula, things like that we don't see on a regular basis at the food pantry. So those cash contributions to your local pantry and local regional allow for that flexibility. So I really think that that's a critical thing. We also need to talk about the importance of SNAP to the grocery store system and the economic benefit of SNAP to those communities. So I want to just highlight that as something that is critical to continue having successful communities, is being able to have those contributions go to local grocery stores. So let's find partnership with our grocery stores, and not just they are donating what they can, but they are also taking a significant economic hit when we have changes in SNAP. So what's giving me hope? All the things. Being on the phone with these local pantries and local communities, we're hearing so many amazing stories. I know many of our partners on the call have mentioned, but I have heard specifically of community dinners in small rural places that they're feeding 160 people a week. We've got libraries that are showing up with meals on a weekly basis. People are stepping up in a way. There was a high school here locally that instead of trick-or-treating, the high school students planned and picked up bags of donated food off everybody's porch.
Wow.
So people are showing up in a way that really does build community. And I think there are these amazing opportunities. We have a local beef producer that said, I'll give you some slots if you have donated steers that people want to process, because there's such a policy around how meat gets donated. People are stepping up in these really unusual ways. And I would just encourage, my daughter and I volunteered at Neighbor Impact. We volunteer several times a year, but it is her very favorite thing to do the repack, where they take donated food and you get to sort. So being able to step in and volunteer, if there are donors on the call, that is such a gift to be able to give of your time.
This is really great, Erin. Thank you. And I love those stories of Oregon. That's really important for us to all hear. All right, we're going to transition now to my colleague, Malian Pack. And Malian is going to come on and say a little bit more about what our donors can do in this moment to help. So, Malian,
Hi.
what can we do?
Hi, thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you to all the panelists. It's always so inspiring to hear your stories. We hope that this webinar has given you some ideas about where you can step up in your local communities and whetted your appetite to learn some more. And if you're interested in supporting any of these local agencies, Oregon Food Bank, or anyone else, we have a few ways that you can do that. You can make a gift to the Oregon Food Bank or to your local food banks and local food pantries, as Erin mentioned. We also invite you to join us by supporting our Stronger Together Fund, and we will, identify some community needs that need your support. At this time of year, we like to remind folks that you have, if you are eligible, an IRA QCD that you can use to support local organizations. You can also direct that QCD to the OCF Stronger Together Fund. And for those of you on the call who have donor advised funds, please reach out to the donor relations team. We're here as a thought partner to help identify local agencies that you can support. We're standing by to help you. We also have our brand new MyOCF that you can log on to and make a grant there. So we have some more time for questions, and I've seen them coming into the Q&A. So I'd like to invite all of the panelists to turn their videos back on, and I believe that Paige is going to lead us through the Q&A.
Yes, I am. Thanks very much. And just a quick note, if you're wondering how to ask a question, just look for the Q&A button in your toolbar and type in your question there. And if you have a question for a specific panelist, just please include their name. So we've had a few questions already come in. And if we can't get to your question by the end of the webinar, we will follow up with you afterwards. So let's get started here. We have a question that says, it seems to me that government programs aren't coming back in the same way. What programs, projects, or coalitions have you heard about that are planning for the future? Are there any collaborative funding efforts we should be paying attention to, especially for those of us interested in supporting systems change work? And I think I'll just start. I think a few of you could answer that question, but Erin, why don't can we start with you on that?
Certainly. I think that you're correct. There are some systems that are going to be changed. I know, Rick, you mentioned that we're going to see an increase in food bank use because we're seeing shifts in all those sort of government safety net systems. So I think the more philanthropic individuals and donors can come together and work collectively, so the burden doesn't lie with the partners on the ground to have to actively seek out opportunities from each of our own organizations or each of our own donations, that's always a really great way to work together and work collectively. And I think, Lisa, even just by hosting this webinar, it's an opportunity for people to come together and remove the burden from the communities on the ground. But I do think there will be continued need across the state, and we really do. People are very generous towards the end of the year every year. That just is the nature of humanity. But I think, Andrea, you noted that this is an ongoing need, and let's focus on what it looks like in January and February and March, and as the year continues, as we see these challenges.
Would anyone else like to add to that?
Outside of the funder world, but into the advocacy world in terms of coalitions, there's a coalition called Food for All Oregonians. You can look at their website. Oregon Food Bank is a part of it, but a ton of other nonprofits are part of it as well. We came together in the previous legislative sessions to expand SNAP. Unfortunately, those proposals were too expensive for the state, and so they failed. But we are coalescing and regrouping around how do we, number one, protect our first line of defense against hunger, which is SNAP. And because of the implementation of HR1, the state will be having to take on a greater financial burden to keep this program going. And so I would encourage anyone who's interested in advocacy, take a look at Food for All Oregonians. Certainly the regional food banks that we are a part of are also figuring out their advocacy plans as well to support SNAP and other social services. But at this point in our minds, we turn to the state. And there will be a short session in February and then a long session the following year, in which the state will have very difficult decisions to make around its limited budget. And we will need all the voices we can take to continue to remind people about how important investments in our social safety net really are. And so that would be the other avenue I would suggest people look at for systems change.
So look ahead to the coming legislative sessions. That's great. Well, I have you, Andrea. We have a question asking, does Oregon Food Bank list publicly the groups they support with network support funds so that we can swing support to those organizations? Let's see. Yes, I guess that's the best way to ask that.
Yeah, so in terms of the network support funds that we make available, yes, they are modest in amount. So I will caveat with that. And so definitely encourage folks on this call to give directly to their regional food bank or their local pantry, because certainly there is so much more need than Oregon Food Bank can cover. The way you can find who's connected and officially part of Oregon Food Bank is through foodfinder.org. It's a map that we provide to individuals looking for food, but you can also see which pantries and which regional food banks are part of that. And so that's one way to take a look about in your local area. And then in terms of our website, I can put into the chat where we list other organizations that we support, but we certainly don't list them all on our website because there are so many, right? There's 1,200 pantries that are part of our network, for example. But the best way you can do that, foodfinder.org on our website to find the place, the nonprofits nearest you.
Yeah, and I can guarantee you, every regional food bank would love to have a conversation with you. So if you're in, if you're in Central Oregon, it's very rare that I'm going to say, "Hey, Central Oregonian, why don't you support Marion Polk Food Share?" But Neighbor Impact is going to say, "We could help you understand the direct impact you have in your community." And so, and I believe that the largest donations will happen with local commitment, local support for what's happening in your neighborhood. And then occasionally, some donors will say, "Hey, I'd like to have a larger statewide conversation." And then in that case, if it's Neighbor Impact, if the person's in Bend, Scott would say, "Great, let's have a conversation together about what that looks like and maybe bring in Oregon Food Bank if that's the way that works." And same way in Marion Polk County or in Klamath Falls. And local giving helps. You all are donors who people respect and will say, "You've done some due diligence, some credibility." And so not only is your gift the gift of whatever amount you give, it is actually your voice saying, "I trust Lori in Klamath Falls and Klamath Falls Food Bank or Marion Polk Food Share." And it matters. So I appreciate all of that local support.
Thanks, Rick. We have a question about how tribes are faring, and I think each one of you from our regions can talk about the tribes in your area. Rick, since I have you, can you kick that question off, please?
We partner directly with specifically the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, some but less directly with Celeste. And just mediocre is what I'm going to answer. I mean, I don't have a great picture here because tribes are part of the people that have been marginally excluded from programs and systems. And they had some cutbacks during HR1. you saw that the governor, not only did she give 5 million to Oregon Food Bank, the network of regional food banks in Oregon, she also is giving 1 million to tribes because there's a higher level of hunger on tribal members have a higher level of hunger than the statewide average. So our food bank network across the state partners with tribes. I am pretty sure that's a true statement that every local regional food bank has a relationship with a local tribe. I know we do, and I'm pretty sure that's standard.
Lori, can you talk about your area? Thanks, Rick.
Yes, we partner with our Klamath tribe friends, and they call us when they need us. We don't receive the call nearly as often as I would love to help them, but they seem to have a really great network within their own community that helps take care of them. But we're here for them. I would love to help them more.
Thanks, Lori. And Scott?
We partner with the Warm Springs tribes. The demand up there is enormous, as you might imagine. I believe over half the population is dependent on SNAP. One of the things we saw when the SNAP cuts were announced was folks started piling onto buses provided by the tribes and went into Madras to take food from the local food pantry there. That's the next community 30 miles over. And that's a potential flashpoint when you suddenly have a lot of people that you don't normally see showing up to take food at a time of scarcity. And we certainly rushed food up there immediately and rushed to get another. There are 2 pantries. One was seasonally closed. We moved to reopen that one in the crisis to try and ameliorate some of the potential inter-community conflict. But it's serious at in the tribal communities.
Aaron, I see you coming off mute.
Yeah, thanks, Paige. I think that, tribal partners are a big portion of the work that we do. We've been able to be in touch with 7 of the 9 federally recognized tribes. The commodities program, where they do receive food already through a separate line item at USDA, is still available, but it has changed distribution systems. And so there is a delay. We are hearing directly from tribal food pantries. There's one in particular that said they were taking food off their own shelves at home and bringing it in to be able to distribute at the pantry. So I do think there is, as all have mentioned, such an increased need, particularly with those tribal partners.
Thanks, Aaron. We have a question asking specifically about will a donation to the Oregon Food Bank be distributed to regional centers so that hygiene items and other types of items can be received by those who need them? Andrea?
We don't typically distribute hygiene items. A lot of the pantries tend to source those from local donors or purchase them locally. So the short answer is no, because we deal with food only at the Oregon Food Bank. Thanks.
Paige, there's a slight exception to that. The community action agencies that are food banks are already working, half of them are already working with the Administration for Children and Families to distribute hygiene products and diapers specifically to Head Start families and other low-income families. So they may be able to help out with that.
Thanks for sharing that resource. Malian, did you have a question that you'd like to answer?
There was a question that was asked about Meals on Wheels, specifically in the West Linn area. And my assumption is that there's Meals on Wheels drivers needed everywhere. But I was wondering if A, somebody had an answer to that question, and B, if someone can talk, maybe Aaron, about how the Older Americans Act is related to Meals on Wheels and what that means for Meals on Wheels specifically.
I will do my best. I have learned a lot about federal alphabet soup over the course of the last year and a half. So my understanding, and many of you on the call may know better than I, that the Aging Americans Act is also one of those programs that has received cuts through HR 1 and other executive orders. Aging Americans Act provides resources not only to our senior centers, but also to Meals on Wheels and other service providers. And so that food is directly impacted. I do understand that they have a process that they vet their volunteers. So I'm sure everyone on this call would pass that process, but I want to make sure that you call your local Meals on Wheels center and ask about what that process entails to be included in that volunteer system. There are a lot of opportunities to volunteer, but making sure that you have that personal connection and that phone call with folks is really critical. And it looks like, Rick, that you also host a Meals on Wheels site. Maybe you can add some insight.
Yeah, I can't imagine a Meals on Wheels site not needing volunteers. Um, People volunteer oftentimes once a week, and they have a regular route, so they have regular clients. Um, Meals on Wheels is currently not. I'm a little lost on what's happening in HR1 around Meals on Wheels in the Older American Act. Um, it's not currently in the news as much as, excuse me, Medicaid is definitely going to impact Meals on Wheels. So what's going to happen at Meals on, sorry, I was getting off track there. What is going to happen is Medicaid, which is how people can use dollars to help get their Meals on Wheels, is definitely going to be a reduction. We're going to definitely see seniors hurting for that. It's really troubling because if you lose some if you lose some volume of food at a local pantry, every family's still going to get food. They're just not going to get as much. I'm really concerned about Meals on Wheels with Medicaid because I'm not going to serve a senior 2/3 of a meal. You know, a family going to a grocery pantry might get 2/3 of what they would have gotten previously. I don't know, but with Meals on Wheels, we're going to serve 2/3 the number of seniors in that example. So it will be harmful.
Yeah. I would add just quickly that I think the senior companion programs have been cut across the country as well, which are a lot of those loneliness and isolation prevention systems that help sign seniors up for Meals on Wheels and other needs that may come up. So we may also see a disconnect from the folks being able to access those programs because there is no longer funding around what's happening with those senior connections and companion programs.
Thank
Paige,
you.
I want to thank you for navigating this. I think we're kind of at the end of our hour, and I want to start by thanking the over 100 people that are on this call. At Feeding America, where I have the pleasure to serve on the board, we refer to people experiencing hunger as our neighbors. And everybody who's spoken today, Lori and Scott and Rick and Andrea, you were really revealing to us what it's like to be a good neighbor. And I think that is why people join this call. So, Erin, thank you for joining. When I think about what we heard today, I think the urgency is severe. And that's why we wanted to have this call so that donors could hear firsthand about the urgency of food insecurity. But where all of you have helped us understand is that this is a challenge that's been brewing and increasing even before the moment of the SNAP cessation during the government shutdown. You've made it very, very clear that we were already on an upswing and that Oregon has its own particular challenges. I think Rick's line that there is a system, though, should give us some hope that we're not just inventing a system in the middle of the crisis, that there are hands and resources that need our fuel. And I think that is one of the key takeaways from this, that we do have a system of food banks and food pantries, and that our panelists are really saying, give now, give locally, give to the Oregon Food Bank if you so desire. Our fund is called Stronger Together, but this is a moment to give. I also think we should end on the fact that this isn't just a moment. Sustained giving is one of the things that Oregon Community Foundation donors do well. You're able to give year over year and stick with causes. You don't have to just be a flash in the pan. Our DAF holders come together each year, each quarter, and think of things they want to give. And this is a time when this system needs sustained giving. So I'm very proud that we have that ability to respond at the Oregon Community Foundation. So I want to thank everybody who gave us also some inspiration about what allows them to keep going. And I hope as donors, we'll keep going, helping our neighbors at a time of great need. Thank you all. Thank you for being part of this webinar. Please keep giving, and thank you for being part of today's webinar. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.